Good Monday morning, baseball fans. Glad you have joined us again for another episode of Around the State. I am David Sharp, Deep South Supervisor for Prep Baseball, along with our Alabama Scouting Director, Austin Sharp. Obviously, this is a weekly thing we're doing, getting you caught up on the things that have been going on. But I think most importantly is this is how we release our new rankings. They'll be released on our social media later in the day today. But for those of you that want to listen, we give you a jump start on hearing the new rankings, 1A through 7A, and our Power 25 poll. Again, those two things will be released as we get towards the end of this podcast. Man, we've really gotten a pretty strong following, man. I think last week we were over 6,000 views, maybe. Right at 6,000. And we appreciate each and every one of you. Obviously, we had a big weekend this past weekend. We'll talk more about that later. Austin, good morning. Things well with you?
Yep, going great. It's great to not having to be, I'm not going to say it's great, but these past 3 weeks been swamped with, going to games early in the week and then having to do team previews, getting ready for obviously had the Kickoff Classic opening weekend, South Alabama Showdown the second weekend, and then the Small Town Showdown this past weekend. So kind of now easing into the spring now with our typical going out to games in the spring. And it was fun. It was, the Kickoff Classic and the South Alabama Showdown were awesome. We talked about those, but just the Small Town Showdown, just that for those that were there I think they can kind of speak to it as well. But and I know you will as well. But it was a pretty cool event. First time we've ever done it, and we can kind of transition into it if you want. But just the being able to be at Sand Mountain Park, a state of the art 4-field turf fields, and inviting some of the top Class 3A to 1A programs in the state of Alabama, and giving those teams an opportunity to get some exposure and just kind of highlight their program while playing against other talented lower classification teams, and getting to see some new players what stood out to me was that Friday night feel, at night playing under the lights at Sand Mountain Park. Those small town teams, they brought a really good crowd. It was a fun atmosphere to be at. I think we both said, we're used to going to the 4, 5, 6, 7A, but these teams, they get after it, especially their fans. They create a fun environment, and it was a great weekend at Sand Mountain.
Yes, it was. And I'll echo the same things that Austin just said about this weekend. Austin Miller, good morning. Appreciate you jumping on. It was an awesome experience. And you mentioned it, just being there in one setting, it's a different feel. And I hate to, just mimic what you said, but it's a different feel. And I know at one point you and I were talking behind field 2, the stadium, or maybe it wasn't you, it was somebody I was talking to. It might've been you. I can't remember, but it's possible. I mean, I don't mean this slight towards any other 1A, 2A, or 3A team, but it's very possible we could have 1, 2, or 3 state champions that was in that field, 1A, 2A, and 3A. But again, we appreciate everyone that came out. I do have to say it was one of the cooler moments for me this weekend was I was covering a particular game on field 1, and I'm not going to say the parent, not even going to say the teams, but a grandmother came up to me and said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I love listening to you in Austin every Monday morning at 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to share who it is, but I told her that I would give her a little bit of a shout out, but on the podcast, but don't want to reveal who she is. But man, it was awesome. Just recapping briefly, we're not going to go over all the scores. Just a couple teams. We had 3 teams that went 3-0. Prattville Christian, man, in a dominating fashion. They went 3-0. Obviously, we've had them 1 or 2 all year. We're only 3 weeks in, but we've had them 1 or 2 in 3A. and rightfully so. They are deserving of that ranking. We'll see where they are in 3A this week here in just a couple minutes. Vincent, the Yellow Jackets, man, they went 3-0 as well. Won a thrilling game 3 on field 1 at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Casey Fields, the thing went into the bottom of the 8th. Casey Fields, a player that, man, I am really, really high on. Got out, I think, 3 tweets on him in one game. It was just really, really impressive with a walk-off bomb in the bottom of the 8th to seal that win for Vincent. And then Gordo, the Green Wave, came up. They also went 3-0. And speaking to the Gordo people, I hear that they've got a little superstition that they had – and I'm not saying this. This is just from the Gordo people, that they had been struggling early in the year. And then they went back to a superstition that they had last year, and they brought that superstitious item with them this week, and it worked. They went 3-0. So
that's the same spirit that there was somebody else who said he was really superstitious. He would stand down the first baseline when they were hitting and then walk behind home plate when they were pitching.
That was the same guy that brought the item. That was the exact same guy.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I'll say this. The item was the cooler that the boys had in the dugout to keep their waters. They had not had that cooler early in the year, but a parent said, "Hey man, we got to bring that team cooler out and put it in the dugout." And they brought it for the first time this weekend, went 3-0. So if you're playing Gordo, man, you may want to make sure that cooler doesn't make it into the dugout. So that's but again, those 3 teams went 3-0. We also had 2 teams that went 2-0. Oakman, I did not get to see Oakman, but that's a scrappy bunch, man. They will fight and claw and get after it until the last out. They went 2-1. I think their only loss was to Mars Hill.
Yeah, they play their game the right way. I didn't get to watch them, but I was kind of back and forth, and you can just tell they play the game the right way. Coach Hall does a great job, and excited to follow them the rest of the season.
I actually saw Oakman taking pregame before their first game on Friday and had to watch Coach Hall swing the fungo. And I let him know that was pretty good fungo. But yeah, Oakman went 2-1, and Whitesburg Christian, they also went 2-1 this weekend as well. And again, it's much like the Kickoff Classic. It's much like the South Alabama Showdown. Man, you know, I had like 2 people say, "Man, you didn't do us any favors this weekend with the schedule." I mean, everybody played 3 really good teams. I mean, you could go 0-3, 1-2, 2-1, 3-0. You know, you're going to face a quality opponent every time out. And that's why we did that. So it went off without a hitch, great weather. Everything was on time. It was great. So we are pumped for that. And we're already planning for next year. So, you know, getting that thing rolling for next year. I know that sounds crazy early, but you do have to get on that about a year in advance. Austin, you want to go over our next 2 items real quick?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and get into our Prep Baseball shop.
Our weekly plug, right?
I think you're wearing the Waffle House edition Prep Baseball. Yeah, I got the normal black with the logo. I've bought a ton of stuff off the website. I think they're going to add some more stuff, as well as they've got the St. Patrick's Day, the green shirts up on the site. They've got a ton of stuff that we're both wearing out to games. And if you're interested in buying merchandise, obviously head to that website right there, shop.prepbaseball.com. They've got hats, T-shirts, shorts, pants, sweatshirts. They've got a lot of stuff on the website. So if you're interested, head over to shop.prepbaseball.com to check out the latest prep baseball merch. We'll go ahead and get into our commitment corner. We've got 2 guys, both from the same high school, both guys who we saw this past week, both from Prattville Christian. First one, he has been committed, but I think it just I don't think he put it out on social media and found out this weekend that he did commit. So, and that's Bryce Masters, first base, left-handed pitcher. He committed to CAC, and on Saturday, man, Bryce hit 4 home runs on Saturday at the Small Town Showdown. Now those fields are, but he definitely got some power. He's got some power from the left side. Had a good weekend for Prattville Christian, going 3-0. And then the other one, Jack Dyfender, for a left-handed pitcher, first baseman, committed to Pearl River yesterday. big left-handed pitcher, 6'4", 6'5", was up to 88 on the mound. Really good outing against, I think he threw against Oakman. I want to say Oakman or Mars Hill, I forget. And he obviously came to our South Alabama preseason All-State in Orange Beach and was really good and has really seemed to parlay that into the spring, off to a good start. And he adds to the depth that Prattville Christian's got on the mound. And so congrats to both of those guys, Bryce Masters and Jack Dyfrender, for both of their families on their commitments to continue their playing career at the next level.
That's right. Congratulations. And again, if we miss one, please let us know. We're not going to get every commitment, but we try to, scour social media. There is a link or a button on our website when on your profile. If you do commit, that we automatically get an update. We obviously have to verify that and make sure it's true before we put it out. So there's ways to let us know. So please keep us up to date there. We try to stay up to date, but we're probably going to miss one here or there. So, we want to give you a shout out, I guess you can say, if you do commit. Before we get into the class polls this week, just a brief synopsis of what's going on ahead this week. And I want to say one more thing, man. Speaking of scouring all avenues to try to find out information, man, I am looking for a game to go to up here in North Alabama today. I don't see one game. In Austin's in the Auburn area. I'm in the North area. We've got a couple scouts in the Dothan area that will be out and about this week. We've got a scout in the Mobile area that will be out and about. I will probably be headed south on Thursday. Probably going to try to hit a game somewhere, Birmingham area, Gadsden, somewhere in there. So Thursday, going to try to get down that way. But if anybody is listening and you're in North Alabama and got a game today, please shoot that in the comments there. I'd like to know, because I've looked at everything and I don't know if there is a game being played up here. But with that being said, looking ahead this week, obviously today on the podcast we'll be releasing our classification polls, our Power 25. Tomorrow, as always, be on the lookout for our Mizuno Pitcher of the Week and our Mizuno Player of the Week. I will tell you that, man, we've got it narrowed down to about 2 or 3 people for both of them. We have still not made our decision. Man, there's some decisions to be made for Pitcher and Player of the Week. And then also tomorrow we will be releasing our scout blog from the aforementioned Small Town Showdown that we just got finished wrapping up. Wednesday, we'll be releasing our Diamond Notes. For those of you that are not aware, the Diamond Notes are simply there are people that were recommended for Player of the Week or Pitcher of the Week that just didn't make it, but are worthy of some recognition. That will come out on Wednesday in our Diamond Notes. And then, as always, every week, and we've already got one out from this morning, we'll be updating our scout blog as we get out and see games of players that are worthy of a mention in the scout blog. Again, that's for all the games that we get out and see. It's updated as we see them. So that's what's going on this week. I think most people jump on here for our class polls. So I think, Austin, we'll go ahead and give the people what they want, man.
Yep, we'll go ahead and get into 1A.
Not a lot of movement this week, is there?
And some classifications stayed pretty close to last week, and then some there were a pretty good amount of movement. But we'll go ahead and get into 1A, where we have a new number 1. Starting it off in 1A, the same 10 teams stay inside the top 10. But like I mentioned, a new number 1. But we'll start at number 10. Brantley slides down a spot. They still have yet to play a game, at least to our knowledge. I don't think they played a game. They're still 0-0. Billingsley made their debut into the poll last week at number 10, and they move up a spot this week. They went 2-1 this past week and sit at 5-1. Lynn stays put at number 8. They are 6-1 and went 2-1 this past week. At number 7, you have Fayetteville. Fayetteville went 1-1 this past week and slide down one spot to number 7. At number 6, you have Sweetwater, who slides down from number 5 to number 6 this week. They sit at 4-3. They went 1-2 this past week. Also sliding down one spot is Millery, who sits at 5-3. Went 1-2 this past week. Making a pretty big jump this week. Our biggest mover in our top 10 in Class 1A is Leroy. Leroy is off to I think they're the Bears. They're off to an undefeated season. They are at 7-0 and went 3-0 this past week. They jump up from number 7 to number 4. And then looking at the top 3, you have Appalachian, who stays put at number 3. They're 7-1, went 3-1 this past week. And number 2 is Florala, who we obviously saw in the small town showdown this past week, went 1-2, had a big win on Friday night over Lauderdale County. Like I said, Mitch stay at 5-2. They went 3-2 this past week, but more so speaking more to the success Hackleburg has had in the start of the season, and not looking at this based off of records. Saying Florala lost a game, so they have to go down. We look at different things, who each teams have beat, obviously. And that's the reason Hackleburg moves up to number 1 this week. They went 3-0, and they're off to a 7-0 start. So we're rewarding those teams for having early season success, but also looking at different factors and variables doing these rankings each week. So that's your top 10 for Class 1A. Looking at some teams just outside the top 10, Addison is 6-5. Jacksonville Christian is 4-1. South Lamar is 0-2. Eider is off to a good start this season. They make their way into that just outside the top 10. They sit at 6-1. University Charter is 4-4, and then rounding it out, Athens Bible is 4-1, and those are obviously in no particular order. So that'll do it for Class 1A. We'll go ahead and get into Class 2A.
Yeah, and before we get to 2A, just a couple things real quick. With these records, we try to get them right. We feel like we're pretty close, but again, the game changers help. That's the best way. There are other avenues we have. Actually, we actually talked to some coaches, asked them their records. It's so please, we try to get these records right. And also, Austin mentioned this as well. And I think I say this weekly just to remind people, and I had someone this weekend in Albertville tell us, man, I love how y'all do your rankings. You don't just look at win-loss. Who you've played is very important. Austin just touched on that. So that's going
to be pretty clear in 6 and 7A.
Yes, it sure is. And so we'll go ahead and move to 6A. We do have one
2A.
New team. 2A, excuse me.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and move to Class 2A, where we have one new team this week. Reeltown, they make their first appearance this week. Reeltown went 2-0 last week. They currently sit at number 4 at 4-2, and as I mentioned, debut at number 10. St. Luke's Episcopal, they sit at 4-2 after a 2-1 week. They slide down a notch from 8 to 9, but again, no disservice to them. Bayshore Christian drops from 7 to 8. We talked about it. We saw Bayshore Christian. You look at that 2-7 record, and you begin to think, man, that's that how can they be ranked 8? Well, they've played some large schools from the Mobile area. They played 3 quality opponents in 2A and 3A this week, and as we were talking about this last night, Austin and I both agreed Bayshore Christian is going to be a tough out. There's no doubt about that. So do not let that 2-7 record fool you. The quality of competition is impressive. Decatur Heritage, they slide up from 9 to 7. They are 3-0, just off of a basket. And a lot of these schools are off of a basketball run where these small schools share a lot of athletes. So Decatur Heritage is just really getting cranked up. I think their boys got beat in the state semifinals in Birmingham. At staying put at number 6 is Summerton Christian. They went 1-2 this week. And again, all 3 of those games were at the small town showdown. And they had an epic game. Maybe the right word epic is not right, but they had an impressive, well-played game against number 5, GW Long. I think GW Long won it in the bottom of the 7th. On a suicide or safety squeeze, I'm not sure. Those 2 teams sit at 5 and 6 after, I think it was maybe 3-2. I can't remember the exact score. It was a 1-run game.
I think it was 2-1 safety squeeze in the bottom of the 7th.
Yeah, GW Long was 2-1 on that safety squeeze. So Summerton Christian stays put at 6. They're at 4 and 5. GW Long, they drop a couple spots. They went 2-2 this week. They beat Carroll early in the week. They slide from 4 to 5 with a 4-2 record. Pike Liberal Arts, They jump up after going 3-3 this week. They sit at 5-5, and that's another team that is going to play high-level competition. So that 5-5 record could be a little misleading. Mars Hill Bible, they stay put at at number 3. They went 1-3 this week, but again, they did not have their basketball players with them. They will be getting them now. They had some of them this weekend. They had an early week loss to Briarwood Christian, a very good 5A team. So Mars Hill Bible is going to be there. The top 2, they remain the same as well. Vincent, they sit at 8-2 after going 3-2 this week. And I mentioned they went 3-0 at the Small Town Showdown. I really like that team. They've got some quality depth. We knew about those frontline guys, but in game 3 on Saturday, they threw a guy. Listen to this name, man. And when I heard the guy's name, yes, Calvin Johnson was pitching, and I thought, man, I wonder. And next thing I know, behind me, I heard people holler, "Let's go, Megatron!" And he had a big hit for him as well. So he's a junior, right-handed arm, big hit, hits for them. Was like 80-81, but was difficult to barrel up. He did a good job again in his start against Bayshore Christian. And staying put at number 1, Ayrton, they went 4-0 this week. They currently sit at 7-0, and continue to hold on to that top spot. As Austin mentioned, these teams outside the top 10 are in no particular order. Bell Green, they're still undefeated at 5-0. Cedar Bluff is 8-2. Cottonwood is at 6-3. Austin Miller and his boys, they're right outside the top 10, sitting at 6-3. Donahoe, they are at 1-3. Lindsay Lane, they have a record of 3-4 currently. North Sand Mountain, the Bison, are at 5-2. Red Bay, a team that we're following closely, after a 2-0 week, they even their record at 2-2. And then Susan Moore rounds us out, and those outside the top 10, they come in with a 3-3 record. So that'll wrap us up in 2A.
Jumping to Class 3A, we have 2 new teams this week making their debut in the Class 3A top 10. First one of those teams is W.S. Neal, who sits at 4-1. They had a big win over T.R. Miller, who T.R. Miller was number 10 last week. So they had a big win over them. They're 4-1. They come in at number 10. And number 9 is Lauderdale County, who we obviously saw, like we said, in the Small Town Showdown. They dropped down a few spots to number 9. They sit at 3-5. The second team to make their debut in the top 10 in Class 3A is Thorsby. Thorsby's had a really good start to the season. I know they're 9-2, coming off of a big week where they went 5-0. I know they've beaten Holtville, and their 2 losses have come to Prattville Christian and St. James, who we'll talk about obviously here, 2 of the top teams in Class 3A. So 2 good losses there, and having an impressive 9-2 record warrants a pretty big jump. They come in at number 8. And number 7 is Gordo, who jumps up 1 spot. Like you mentioned, they went 3-1 this past week, went undefeated at the Small Town Showdown. They are 3-4. And number 6 is Thomasville, sliding up 1 spot. Got off to an 0-3 start, but have seemed to really start to get things rolling. They went 3-2 this past week and sit at 3-5. Collinsville stays put at number 5. Collinsville is 5-3. Went 1-3 this past week. They went 1-2 at the Small Town Showdown, but was really impressed with them. I know they've got quality hitters up and down their lineup. At number 4 is Piedmont, who sits at 4-1, went 3-0 this past week. Number 3 is St. James, who slides up 1 spot. They went 7-1, or they are 7-1. At number 2 is Glenwood, who slides down 1 spot this week. They sit at 5-3, and then jumping up to number 1 this week in Class 3A is Prattville Christian. They sit at 10-0 and had a big week. Got to see a bunch of their games this past week in Montgomery, and then playing at the Small Town Showdown. So they take over the top spot this week in Class 3A. Looking at some teams just outside the top 10 in Class 3A, you have Fife, who's 4-2. JB Pennington is 5-2. Lee Scott Academy is 4-5. Montgomery Academy is 4-1. Oakman is 7-5. Providence Christian is 3-6. TR Miller is 4-3. Vinemont is 7-2. Whitesburg Christian is 3-4, but they've got good talent up and down their roster. Wicksburg is 4-2, and Winfield rounds us out at 7-3. think you're muted.
Sorry, my dog was barking. Sorry about that. That'll move us on to 4A. In 4A, let's take a look at the top 10. First off, we have one new team this week. The Tigers of Madison County. They come in, they make their debut at number 10. They come in at an impressive 6-1 record. Their lone loss was to 6A Hazel Green in extra innings by 1 run, but they've gotten off to an impressive start. Have the Tigers. At number 9 is Bayside Academy. Bayside Academy falls a few spots. They dropped from 5 to 9 after going 1-3 this week. That's a pretty offensive lineup. We think they'll be around for the long haul as well. Alexandria, they slide up from 10 to 8 as they went 3-1 this week and currently sit at 8-2. And I'm pretty impressed. Pretty impressed with that Alexandria group because they lost a ton from last year's 5A state championship. So that's an impressive start for them, winning 8 out of 10. At number 7, the Etowah Blue Devils, they went 4-1 this week. And I think we've said this just about every time. Etowah is a team that will play anybody, anywhere. They have already shown that early this season. So Etowah comes in at 6-5 after a 4-1 record. Orange Beach, they drop a couple of spots after going 2-1 this week. And I want to say this about Orange Beach. That's really not a knock on them. It's just rewarding some of those other teams that have just been on fire, to be honest with you, and have had some really big wins. So, Orange Beach drops a few spots, but we know what kind of team Orange Beach is. We saw them last weekend over the long haul, and again, coming off a big season a year ago. Jumping up, one of those teams we talked about with a hot start, Op, they jumped from 9 to 5. They jumped from 9 to 5. They come in with a 7-1 record after going 3-1. That's Op. At number 4, Bibb County, man. I think it's the same song, different verse for Bibb County because they always are tough, hard-nosed. That's a program notorious for winning. They jump up from 6 to 4 this week after going 3-1 and sit at 6-2. A big win over Hillcrest Tuscaloosa. We know how good Hillcrest is. That win really turned some eyes. Oak Grove, they move up from 4 to 3 after going 3-0 this week. They sit at 7-1. And then we flipped Westbrook Christian and Deschler this week, and this was something that we really we went back and forth on this. Deschler is at 8-1 after going 3-1 this week. I'm almost certain their lone loss was to Athens, 6A Athens, maybe by 1 run.
2-0.
2-0. And they could very easily stay put at number 1. But Westbrook Christian, the same thing. They beat some quality teams. They are unscathed right now at 8-0. They jumped from 2-1 after going 2-0 this week, and they currently have the top spot there, 8-0 at 8-0. Teams outside the top 10, we had a typo previously. W.S. Neal. All right. W.S. Neal, I don't know how we messed that up. W.S. Neal comes in at 4-1. They are outside the top 10 in 4A.
We'll say T.R. Miller will go back to the number 10 spot in 3A.
Yeah, that's correct. T.R. Miller will be number 10 in 3A. That's correct. Yeah. That was just, we know their classifications. That was just an error on us. I don't know how, because we've got W.S. Neal listed here in 4A. So they're outside the top 10 at, I believe they're 4-1. Continue on down the list. New Brockton comes in at 5-2. Haleyville at 4-5. Hamilton at 4-4 after a 2-2 week. Hanley sits at 5-1, rolling off some impressive wins early in the season. Definitely a team to follow. New Hope dropped a couple of games this week. They are at 3-3. North Jackson is at 2-2. The Gators of Satsuma are 7-0, and that record caught our attention. And we're gonna, we look forward to seeing how they continue to progress over the year. But that's definitely a team that's making a push to try to get inside the top 10. Tallahassee is at 2-6. They rebounded from a tough start. They went 2-2 this week, I think, after being 0-4. Westminster Christian 1-5, but they've played the likes of I think Athens, Huntsville, James Clemens, maybe Marbury. They have played some larger schools. So again, Westminster Christian with that 1-5 record, really testing themselves early and rounding us out, dropping out of the top 10 this week is Trinity Presbyterian. They went 0-4 this week. They currently sit at 2-5 and are on the outside looking in at the top 10. So that'll wrap us up in 4A.
Jumping to Class 5A, and this is one of the classifications, as you can see, not much movement in the top 10. We do have one new team that makes their way in, and we've got a few teams outside the top 10, a good group of probably 3 or 4 teams that have a real case to jump in, but or to be inside the top 10. And we talked about it. 5A we think is a pretty deep classification, but a team sitting up top, man, they continue to have a big start to the season. But that one new team who makes their way in is Valley. Valley is a perfect 10-0 coming off of a semifinal appearance last year in Class 5A. Big start to the season. They've continued their success from last season. They come into this week's rankings at number 10. Jumping up one spot this week is Headland from 10 to number 9, they sit at 8-2. And number 8, staying put this week is Elmore County. They sit at 7-3. Went 2-3 this past week. I was able to catch one of their games against Stanhope Elmore. Very balanced lineup. Was really impressed with them. Also staying put is Mobile Christian. Went 1-3 this past week. They sit at 3-6. But anyone who has followed baseball or has seen Mobile Christian play like we have this spring, and you look at their schedule, they played the elite of the elite. I think they played Thompson this past week. They played a bunch of bigger classification schools. May not have had the type of the record to back that up, but you go watch them. Their lineup that led by Damian Gatson, a bunch of other guys, and they finished as the runner-up last year in Class 5A. They'll continue to get better as the season goes on. They stay put at number 7 this week.
What about that score? What about that score when it popped across our game changer this week?
I know. I sent it to you. It was 25-13.
Them and Thompson.
Yeah. So, and I think that was just at the end of the week. Everybody just trying to get through it, just rolling out who can pitch. Who can pitch. Mobile Christian. We expect them to be there at the end. Staying put this week. All the rest of these teams stay put. At number 6 is Marbury. They sit at 3-2 this past week to push their record to 9-3. Saw them play against St. James this past week in Montgomery at Patterson Field. At number 5 is St. Paul's Episcopal. They sit at 5-5, went 1-3 this past week. But like Mobile Christian, they have played. I think they played Hoover this past week. Played Oxford. Lost both of those games, I think, by 1 or 2 runs. So playing the top competition and keeping it close, they certainly have the talent to be one of the top teams in 5A. They stay put at number 5 this week. And number 4 is Madison Academy, going 3-1. I know their one loss. They split with Vestavia Hills. That's where that one loss came from. They stay put at number 7 at 7-2 this week. They stay put at number 4. I would think these top 4 teams in Class 5A I don't want to say they separated themselves from the field because it's a really deep Class 5A, but they've really vaulted themselves up into the discussion of being one of the top being the number 1 team, one of the top teams in Class 5A this spring. And number 3 is Faith Academy. They sit at 5-2, went 1-0 on the week, had a big win over 7A Auburn. At number 2, staying put is Springville. Springville went 3-1 this past week. They sit at 7-1. And then staying at the top spot is American Christian, who went 5-1 this past week. They sit at 13-2, an impressive 13-2 record considering the teams that they've played. I would probably put their lineup up against anybody else's lineup in the state, regardless of classification. I think they've got enough pitching on the mound, and they're obviously the main contender in Class 5A. We think at least throughout the first 3 weeks of the season. So they stay at the top spot after taking over last week. So they are definitely a fun team to watch, and excited to follow them throughout the rest of the season. Looking at some teams just outside the top 10 in Class 5A, like we mentioned, there's a good bit of them, and they've got some really good records. We're going to continue to monitor them. You've got Briarwood Christian at 5-5. Alberta is 4-2. Holville is 4-5. Lawrence County is 8-2. Leeds is the one team to drop out from last week's rankings. They sit at 6-2. Lincoln is off to an impressive start. They're 8-2. Moody is 6-2. Northside sits at 5-1. Russellville is 7-3. Sardis is 4-3. Shelby County sits at 6-3, and then St. Clair County rounds us out with a 9-3 record. So that'll do it for Class 5A. Let's go ahead and get into Class 6A.
Yeah, when Austin mentioned it, man, there are only 10 spots, and 5A I think is a reflection of only 10 spots. I mean, and we're not going to take the easy way out and let somebody tie for 10th so we can list an 11th team. And 6A, I think, speaks even more to that. I mean, the volume of quality teams in 6A is absurd. I mean, it is, you mentioned 5A was deep. Man, 6A is every bit as deep. And, there could be a team we don't even have ranked that's outside the top 10 that ends up winning it. I mean, that's legit.
It happened last year.
100% it happened last year. And so, this was a very, very difficult one. We'll go and get cranked up, falling a couple spots this week. And I don't think this is really because of something they did. But Pelham drops from 8 to 10. They come in with a 7-2 record. Listen, man, I don't mean this disrespectful towards anybody, but this Pelham team is a team to follow. I mean, Coach Howard has gotten in there and done a really good job. That's a notorious, and they've been a strong program for years. But, man, I think maybe they may have caught some people off guard early in the year. But, man, they continue to battle against the good teams and put up good numbers. But they come in they drop a couple number 10. At number 9, the Patriots of Homewood. They are at 6-1 after going 3-0 this week. And, yes, we understand that Pelham beat Homewood 2 weeks ago. But we sort of rewarded Homewood. We didn't want to drop Homewood from 9 to 10 because they had a big win this week over Helena, and that was an impressive W for them. So we didn't feel like we could drop Homewood at all.
The head-to-head, I mean, there's a bunch of head-to-heads.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's a one game. And, yeah, we understand winning and losing is on the field. And you know what? These polls will do nothing in deciding the area race, the state playoffs, the state championship. These polls will do nothing for that. We do take into consideration who people play, but one game, who people – is it the back end of 4 games in 2 days? Who did people throw? So, again, don't just look at, one head-to-head matchup that may have happened a couple weeks ago. Saraland, they dropped from 7 to 8. And again, nothing they did. They went 3-1. They come in at 7-2, but there was just a team that we thought really had a good week. We'll talk about them in just a minute. Saraland, it was Auburn they beat this week, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So Saraland had a big win over Auburn. Oxford, they slide down a couple. They dropped from 5 to 7 after going 3-2 this week. They currently sit at 6-5. But again, they're in the mix. There's no doubt about it. And that team that we talked about that has really jumped up, had a big win over Bob Jones. I think they got beat by Hartselle this week. The Coleman Bearcats. And I don't know if you remember the very first podcast of the year, I mentioned – look out for Coleman. I hear that they're going to, that they like where they are this year. And so far that's played out well. Coleman jumps from 10. They jump 4 spots to number 6. They come in at 5-3. Spain Park, man, the Jaguars jump up from 6 to 5. Pretty rough opening weekend for them, playing a lot of young guys, but they have played the best competition possible for 3 weeks. And you're starting to see that team really compete against the best in the state. The Jaguars come in at 8-5 after going 4-1 this week. Mountain Brook, they stay the same. They stay at number 4. Matter of fact, the top 4 remain the same. We talked about mixing these up, but there was really no one really had a clear-cut case into making a big jump. Mountain Brook went 3-2 last week. They sit at 6-3. Helena, they also stay put at number 3 after going 3-2 last week. They are overall 7-4 record. Chelsea, they went
3-2.
3-2 this week. Yeah, they went 3-2 as well. You see what we're dealing with in 6A, man. There's a lot of teams that are really just, I mean, I don't want to say they're just alike, but they are very similar. Chelsea comes in at 7-6, and then holding on to that top spot after going 4-0 this week. The Tigers of Hartselle, they come in with a record of 7-3, and again, reaping the benefits of playing tough competition. So that's our top 10 in 6A. Some of those teams outside the top 10, and you know what? Some of these teams do have a case for being in, but there's only 10 spots. Athens come in with a 6-2 record. Benjamin Russell sits at 3-3. Gardendale is at 5-5. Gulf Shores at 6-3. Hueytown, man, that's a team to keep an eye on. A team that we discussed. They come in at 8-5. Northridge is at 5-3. Southside has won 10 of 11 games. They come in at 10-1 for the year. Spanish Fort had a very good week. They went 3-1 this week to even their record at 5-5. Stanhope Elmore is at 6-3. Hazel Green is at 6-7, a team that I saw early in the week. I really like their position players. They had a good week as well. I was talking to their head coach, Mitchell Wright, and he was, talking about the gauntlet that they're going to play over the next week and a half. If they can just withstand, and maybe that's the wrong word for me to use, but these next 2 weeks for them are going to be very, very difficult. But again, getting this team prepared for later in the season and rounding us out on teams to follow in 6A is Wetumpka. Wetumpka comes in with an impressive 7-3 record. So that'll wrap us up in 6A.
We jump into the biggest classification in the state of Alabama at Class 7A. Not much movement at all, as you can see. We do have one new team who makes their way in. Tuscaloosa County replaces Hillcrest Tuscaloosa at number 10. The Wildcats sit at 8-4 and went 3-2 this past week. We saw them at the South Alabama Showdown and played a bunch of teams tough. May not have had the results that they wanted on the win-loss record, but played a lot of teams tough and have seemed to continue to play really good baseball down the stretch. At number 9 is Grissom, jumping up 1 spot to number 9. They sit at 3-2, had a big win over Thompson this past weekend. So the Tigers come in at number 9. At number 8, staying put. And these next 8 teams all stay put where they were at last week. Enterprise is 7-0. They went 3-0 on the week. And number 7 is Hoover, who's 4-7. But like we mentioned, playing, they obviously played in our kickoff classic, went 2-1, went to California. I think they went 0-3 or 0-4, and that's the CIF league, the toughest league in the country, with the Orange Lutherans, those types of teams. And then they come over here, and I think they played, come back, and I think they've played. They played a bunch of really, really good out-of-state teams as well. Like I said, they sit at 4-7. And number 6 is Fairhope, who went 3-2 on the week. They sit at 5-4. Vestavia Hills goes 3-1 on the week. Like I mentioned, they split with Madison Academy on Saturday. They sit at 6-3. Then number 4 is Central Phoenix City. They played, I think, in the LaGrange Invitational over in Georgia this past week and went 2-2. One of those losses being to Hewitt-Trussville. They come in with an 8-4 record. At number 3 is Bob Jones. The Patriots had a good week, went 4-1 and pushed their record to 9-3. And number 2 is Thompson. They went 3-1 as well on the week. They pushed their record to 9-4. And then staying at the top spot, sitting with a perfect 9-0 record after going 4-0 this past week, the Hewitt-Trussville Huskies continue to play really good baseball out of the gates, and they reclaimed the top spot after taking over last week in Class 7A. Looking at some teams outside the top 10 in Class 7A, you have Auburn, who sits at 7-4. Daphne is 6-5. James Clemens is 4-4. Hillcrest is 4-4. Dothan is 7-3, and Oak Mountain is 5-4. So that'll do it for our Class 1A through 7A polls. We'll go ahead and get into our weekly Alabama Power 25. We unveiled our first one last week, and for those that don't know, the Alabama Power 25 is a top 25 ranking where we rank top 25 teams regardless of classification. So we'll go ahead and jump into that. Obviously, they stayed at number 1 in Class 7A, and they stay put at number 1 in the Power 25. That's Hewitt-Trussville. We'll start at number 25. Hillcrest Tuscaloosa drops a few spots down from 16 to 25 this week. They sit at 4-4. Glenwood also drops down. They sit at 5-3. Prattville Christian makes their way in, going 5-0 this past week. They sit at 10-0. Madison Academy slides up one spot to number 22. They sit at 7-2. Jumping up one spot as well is Faith Academy at 5-2, and Tuscaloosa County at 8-4. Springville jumps up to number 19. They sit at 7-1. Saraland is at number 18. They sit at 7-2. Oxford is 17. They sit at 6-5. Grissom jumps up a couple spots from number 18 to number 16. They sit at 8-2. Making a big jump this week, making their debut in the Alabama Power 25 at number 15 is Coleman. The Bearcats sit at 5-3. Spain Park is number 14 at 8-5. Enterprise is 13 at 7-0. Number 12 is Hoover at 4-7. Fairhope comes in at number 11 at 5-4. Mountain Brook, Helena, and Chelsea stay put at 10, 9, and 8. Mountain Brook is 6-3. Helena is 7-4. Chelsea is 7-6. Vestavia Hills comes in at number 7. They sit at 6-3. Central Phoenix City is 8-4 at number 6. At number 5, jumping up 2 spots, is Hartselle at number 5. They're 7-3. And number 4 is Bob Jones, sitting at 9-3. Thompson is number 3 at 9-4. Making a big jump this week from 6 to number 2 is American Christian. I think that speaks to how highly we think of American Christian. I know we're both really high on them, on the Patriots. Obviously, number 1 in Class 5A, and they're number 2 in the Power 25. They sit at 13-2. And then, like I mentioned, retaining the top spot after being number 1 in last week's Power 25 poll, the Hewitt-Trussville Huskies go 4-0 and push their record to 9-0 heading into the third week of the season. So that'll do it for our top 10 polls for Class 1A through 7A. And that'll wrap us up for our Alabama Power 25 after week 2 of the 2025 season.
Yeah, so as you can see, man, there's some movement in some of the polls, and a lot of them stayed put. We've mentioned it, especially in 6A, man. Those teams are beating each other up. It's good baseball. The state of Alabama has good baseball, 1A through 7A. So, those polls get harder and harder every week for us to do. But that's going to wrap us up for our episode 7 this year for Around the Yard, or excuse me, around the state. I got 7,000 things going on here. I apologize, and I know you do as well. But Around the State, episode 7, just a couple reminders before we log off. Next Monday will be our next podcast. It will be at 10 a.m. as always, where we'll be doing much of the same. The big thing is releasing our 1A through 7A polls and our Power 25 poll again. And as always, and I remind you, man, look at there.
Cassie.
Man, good stuff. Thanks. All right.
Hey, that speaks. They're listening to our podcast and not their son's podcast. There you go.
Yeah, their son's doing the podcast in Mississippi right now. So, but yeah, that'll wrap us up. One thing just to remind that I do every week, as always, on our website, prepbaseballreport.com/Alabama. Up at the top, you've got the black task bar across it. You go there, and there's a tab that says AHSAA. That's where you can click and find everything that we've discussed today and everything that we'll be getting out, and just all of our content from the spring season. So again, we appreciate each of you jumping on and joining us here. We hope to be out and about this week covering some games. If you see us, please come speak to us. We'd love to speak to you. And I guess that'll wrap us up. Again, for Austin Sharp, I am David Sharp. Thanks for joining us around the state, and we'll see you. If we don't see you at the yard, we'll see you next Monday.